Good to see you, Harold. Although we're disappointed you won't be able to join us at the seminar next week, but so happy that you agreed to tape a little message for all the seminarians. This is, if I'm correct, 64th seminar, and I think you were the chair of the
84.
in 1984, which was the 33rd seminar. So I'm sure everybody's very pleased to be able to hear from you today.
Yes, I've been to seminars since the early 70s, and I think this is the third one or fourth one that I've missed.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
I'm sorry that
Yeah.
I'm not being able to be here with all my friends.
Harold, I know when I meet someone who's accomplished as much as you have, I'm always curious about what were the things that were a big influence on you, especially early on. Now, I think you told me once your father was actually a big influence on you very early in your life.
My father, who had a high school education in England, my parents came from England, for some reason decided to start teaching me to read when I was 3 years old, according to the stories my mother told. And the result of that was that I entered elementary school in the third grade.
So instead of starting in the first grade, you went right to the third grade.
Yeah, I was in third grade. I was 6 years old and probably the only third grader who knew the the justices on the Supreme Court, because the original text that my father used to teach me was the morning newspaper, the Memphis Commercial Appeal.
So Harold, I understand you also worked on your school newspaper and that actually had a big impact on your career.
You know, I have had this theory for many years that a person's life consists of defining moments.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most defining moment in my life for a decision that I made was there was an announcement when I was in the 7th grade for reporters to volunteer to work on a high school newspaper. And I volunteered. I, at a very early age, decided I wanted to be a reporter.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And you went to the Commercial Appeal newspaper?
Only Commercial Appeal, the Memphis newspaper.
Yeah.
And I was the high school correspondent. At that time, they ran a high school page, and instead of mailing my article, I would walk to the paper, and after about 3 sessions, the school page editor said, "Sit down and let's go over this together."
Yeah.
And he, I think, taught me more about the basics of journalism than anybody else. And my original intent, as I said, was to be a reporter, and I wanted to be a reporter for the New York Times.
Oh, I see. So you aspired to that early on.
Very frankly, if I'd had bus fare and enough to support me for 3 or 4 months, I would have come straight to New York and tried to find a job up here, but I didn't. And I had this foolish, childish notion that someone was going to discover me and take me to New York. And it happened less than 6 months. The person who did it was the head of a very large engineer building firm that was going to build a very big shell loading plant in the Memphis area. I covered the story, and the story started getting a lot of coverage outside of Memphis because it was the first situation of its kind. I was asked if I could get a leave of absence to handle the media. I was only 19 years old at the time. And I got the leave of absence. My managing editor said, "But you'll never come back." I also got a raise. I was making $25 a week, and I got $50 a week and an automobile. So when people ask me why I went into public relations, I tell them for the money.
Yeah, you're living large then.
Living large.
Yeah.
This head of this company, the owner of the company, said that he would like for me to be on his permanent staff. Actually, one of the great thrills of my lifetime was he asked me to travel with him.
Yeah.
And I traveled with him for 2 years, and I regard that as my Harvard Business School graduate degree.
You really got it on the ground. So the war had already started, but you were not in the military, yet you made a conscious decision to get into World War II, didn't you?
I was had a draft deferment as long as I was working for this engineering company. But I had decided early on that I did not want the war to end without my being in uniform. And I did that purely for the fact that I thought it would be bad for my future career if I were not in uniform, because practically 1 out of every 2 people my age was in the service.
So you made an affirmative effort to get into the military, and then you had a remarkable experience toward the end of the war as well.
I was toward the end of 1943. I asked my draft board to draft me, and talked with my boss about it, and he said a job would be waiting for me after I got out of the service. And my draft board obliged me and drafted me and put me in an engineer combat group, which I wouldn't have bargained for, but I remained in that group until 1 week before the end of World War II. I was in Germany when the war ended in 1945. And through some intercession of friends that I had known in New York and Washington, I was able to get transferred to American Forces Network, which was the Army military radio network for Europe.
So your career in the military was brief. You got into World War II late, but yet you had a very remarkable experience there, didn't you? Going to Nuremberg Trials after the war.
I was a news writer until the trial started in November, and I was very, very fortunate. I thought I got the assignment to cover the Nuremberg trial.
And then and there were prominent American media there, I'm sure.
Oh
as
yeah, well, you know, from that experience, I had a lifelong friendship with Howard K. Smith, who came back to the States. Also, that's where I met Walter Cronkite for the first time. And when he was there, he was on the United Press team, number 4 out of 4 people. Yeah. And it would have been very difficult for me to predict the future of his career, knowing him from those Nuremberg days.
Amazing. And after the war ended, you came back to the States and started Harold Burson Public Relations.
Well, what happened was that my boss died while I was in the service. I did not want to come back to the company as an employee. And of course, I had good connections. And the day the war ended, which was going to be a year before I came home, I wrote the CEO and said, I want to come back to the States, and I want to start my own business, and I want you to be my first client. When I went into my own business, without knowing what I was doing, I differentiated myself by specializing in B2B.
I see. So early on, that was your niche.
That's what my niche, yes.
And then from there, you must have had some seminal events with clients that really...
What happened was I started alone, and I started with 2 clients, and my total income was $1,250 a month. One of my clients gave me office space, so I was doing pretty good. I was 24 years old then. I built it up to 6 people in 1952 when I got a telephone call from a friend at the Times who said a man named Marsteller, who has an advertising agency in Chicago, wants to hire a PR firm to do a project. I met Bill Marsteller. We talked. He arranged for me to go to Pittsburgh to meet the CEO, which was Rockwell Manufacturing Company. The project turned out extremely successful. I got him 3 pages in Life magazine for a new home workshop power tool. And they thought out in Pittsburgh that I could walk on water for a few weeks. And they gave a lunch for me, and I was sitting next to the CEO, and I said, we ought to be doing this on a regular basis. And he said, well, how much would it cost me? And I took a deep breath and said $3,000 a month. And at that time, my biggest client was paying $1,250 a month. I got hired by Rockwell, and about 2 weeks later, Marsteller sent the CEO of his second largest client, which was a company called Clark Equipment Company, which made lift trucks, forklift trucks. And the CEO of that company and I really bonded from the first minute on, and he was really one of my great mentors. He hired me, and when he asked me how much it was going to be, I told him $4,000 a month. And this was the end of 1952, and I was budgeting for 53, and 60% of my business had just come in the past 2 weeks from Bill Marsteller. So I decided to approach him and say, we ought to formalize our relationship. So we started a new company. And Bill had a fairly large ego, and a lot of people wondered how I was able to get my name in front of the hyphen. And there was no doubt in my mind whose name was going to be in front, but actually, when we started, since he put up all the money, he got 51% of his agency did, and I had 49% ownership.
And you grew from there, and you had other big client moments. You went on to...
Yeah, there were two major defining moments, I think, that caused the growth of Burson-Marsteller. The first was in the late 50s when the common market, European common market, was formed. And both Clark and Rockwell were going to build plants in Europe. And so I made the bold decision that we're going to go international.
So from there, you developed other big clients, domestically expanded other places internationally?
Yes, I would say the second major defining moment was when we got General Motors as a client. And that came about really as a result of the Ralph Nader campaign against GM when he wrote this book, Unsafe at Any Speed.
It was the Corvair.
The Corvair, that's right. And the chairman had to testify before a congressional committee, and the board of directors mandated that management hire an outside PR firm. And we at the time were the only public relations firm working for General Motors, and we were working for their locomotive division, electromotive division they called it, and I had gotten to know the top PR people at GM very well, Tony DiLorenzo, who was a legend in this business for 35 years. He and I became friends, and one day he called me and said, the board has mandated that we hire a PR firm, and he said, we're going to talk to three public relations firms. The competition was Hill & Knowlton #1 on the field and Carl Bayer #2. And I thought we were just, Tony was just being nice to us. Yeah. So we went all out and did the survey talking to the different constituencies of General Motors. And the reason we got the business is that we had the guts to tell them exactly what people thought of General Motors, and I think that was probably the first time that the two top executives of General Motors had ever heard all the criticism that was going on from their customers, dealers, suppliers, the media, the regulators. Everybody said that these were really very, very arrogant people. I felt that we had really talked ourselves out of the business. And one day, I got a call from Tony DiLorenzo, and he said, Oscar Lundeen and I are going to visit with you. We want to see where you live. And I knew that they weren't going to go to 3 different places and see their offices. So at that time, I knew we had the business, and it was a great thrill for me.
Well, Harold, both you and Burson-Marsteller have a reputation for identifying and developing great talent. How have you done that?
We decided to be a B2B firm. We wanted to get people who not only were good communicators, but people who knew the business. And I would say of the first 20 people that we hired, probably 12 of them were graduate engineers in civil engineering, automotive engineering, chemicals, so forth and so on. So when we went to talk to clients, we were able to bring people in who were very knowledgeable. And these people came from the trade magazines. Another aspect of it was we started our training program very early in the history of the company, as early as like 1960, 62, something like that. And we wanted to be one company around the world. Our objective when we went to Europe was to become a global firm. And I think that people often ask me, said, what do you think your major contribution or differentiation was in the field? I think I was the first person to realize that public relations could be more than a cottage industry, that it could be a big business.
And you actually developed your own talent.
We were able to attract the talent because we were growing so fast, and we were able to promote people and recognize their talents. When you're static, your people get restless because there are not very many promotions, and they feel that they're wasting or losing time. But I think our growth record made it very easy to get the best recruits.
How is it? Is it still the same today, or how has it changed?
It has changed a good deal today because in those days, people, when they got out of school looking for a job, they wanted an employer where they could spend their careers. Today, of course, these young people are much more mobile. They want to get some experience in one field, and they go to another one, and so forth and so on. And there is not nearly the same kind of loyalty and dedication to your first employer as it was when we were there.
Throughout your career, Harold, you've worked with great CEOs. What about the CEO's role today? Has it changed compared to in the past?
The model was a lot different back then. Usually the top public relations person in even the largest companies, for example, Di Lorenzo was the United Press man who covered General Motors. The chief public relations officer was usually this former news person who stayed with the company year after year and became the most institutionalized position in the organization chart. And the CEOs just didn't feel that their own internal PR person had the background or the perspective that somebody from the outside had. Now, of course, I think corporations have moved away from that. I think the talent is inside the company now to the extent that we on the outside are not nearly as close to the CEO as we were at that time.
Interesting. Now, I think I recall from your first book that you said it's hard to be a CEO today, hard to be a CEO of an agency. Is that true? How has that changed?
Oh, absolutely. I am so thankful that my 35 years were the 35 years that I spent. I don't think it will be nearly as much fun as I had.
And the role, of course, of the CCO has changed. The Chief Communications Officer has changed as well.
It has changed a great deal, yes.
The tenures seem to be a lot shorter, for one thing.
Well, that's true. Tony Di Lorenzo used to say, I trained 6 CEOs at General Motors. That'll never happen today. And I think one reason is that when a new CEO comes in, he doesn't want any ties to the past CEO after he takes office, and so he knows that the CCO was very close to the former CEO. So when the CEO goes, not far behind is the Chief Communications Officer.
So Harold, looking ahead, where do you see the public relations business going?
I have some concerns about the future. My concern is that too much attention is being given communication and not enough to the basic behavior of the enterprise. I think that there is so great an emphasis on increasing profits quarter after quarter after quarter, which seems to me to be an impossible task. And I think also I think many CEOs that I've spoken with would agree with me, that things are being done that are not for the long term. They're very short term, so as to make earnings projections. And one of the things that bothers me a great deal is that very few, if any, business people, corporation headquarters, CEOs, are speaking out against these objectives which they know that are not possible to fulfill over the long term.
And you think that can lead to more trouble for business down the road if they don't pay attention to that?
Yes, I think so. And, you know, I think it's no coincidence that we're getting more recalls than we had before. We're getting more accidents than we've had before. And I think a lot of that is a result of cost cutting. And it's basically, it seems that the rewards are not being spread around as much as they should be. So I think if the political situation gets lined up with the opponents of business in power, I think that the New Deal would seem like a picnic.
Well, Harold, people admire you so much, yet it's unusual to see someone who's accomplished as much as you have and not have that hard edge you see in so many, even CEOs who are really very hard driving. Do you have that hard edge, or do you hide it? Tell us about your style.
To be very honest, I just don't like confrontation. But I think if you examine my record closely, I have done what had to be done for the good of the organization. One of the other aspects of it is that I was fortunate to have 3 associates, Buck Buchwald, Jim Dowling, Bob Leaf, that I trusted implicitly. And Leaf was in charge of international, Buchwald and Dowling at various times the domestic. And I let them run the business. And I set the goals. And when something hadn't been done, my dealings were really with them, so it wasn't widespread among the organization. And I did it in a way that did not embarrass them.
That's come through, Harold, in the way you've dealt with people in your career and the way seminarians know you. Very successful, but a very, very decent person.
Yeah, well, I've always tried to help people as much as I could, and I've gotten a tremendous amount of satisfaction from it. And I think, too, that it's been good business. And I think a good deal of the reputation of the company is based on what I tried to set as the mode of what kind of a company we were.
Well, Harold, I understand you have another book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about it and when we might expect to see it?
Hopefully before the end of the year. My book is titled Defining Moments. I've spoken of a couple of them here today. It covers about 8 or 10 others that I thought really shaped my life. what I tried to do was to have a personal conversation with the reader.
Well, Harold, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to join us at the seminar, but I'm glad we were able to have this personal conversation and get some of your reflections. And we're all going to miss you, but we look forward to seeing you at next year's seminar.
Well, I feel very honored to have been asked to participate. The seminar has meant a great deal to me for many, many years, and I look forward to being at the next seminar with all of you.